It's simply a matter of adjusting what we call the dopamine schedule. Motivation is fundamental to our daily life. It's what allows us to pursue long-term or short-term goals. In fact, the same single molecule, dopamine, is responsible for our sense of motivation and for movement. It's a fascinating molecule, and it lies at the center of so many great things in life and so many terrible aspects of life, namely addiction and certain forms of mental disease. There's a fundamental relationship between dopamine released in your brain and your desire to exert effort, and you can actually control the schedule of dopamine release, but it requires the appropriate knowledge. Dopamine was discovered in the late 1950s, and it was discovered as the precursor, meaning the thing from which epinephrine or adrenaline is made. However, dopamine does a lot of things on its own. It's not always converted to epinephrine. Dopamine is released from several sites in the brain and body, but perhaps the most important one for today's discussion about motivation and reward is something that's sometimes just called the reward pathway. So when you're just sitting around not doing much of anything, this reward pathway is releasing dopamine at a rate of about 3 or 4 times per second. If suddenly you get excited about something, you not receive an award, but you get excited in an anticipatory way, then the rate of activity in this reward pathway suddenly increases to like 30 or 40 times. And it has the effect of creating a sense of action or desire to move in the direction of the thing that you're craving. And that's distinctly different from the way that you hear it talked about normally, which is that it's involved in pleasure. So yes, dopamine is released in anticipation and craving for a particular thing. It has the effect of narrowing our focus for the thing that we crave. And that thing could be as simple as a cup of coffee. The person that we're excited to meet or see, dopamine doesn't care about what you're craving. It just releases at a particular rate. Let's say you're hungry or you're going to see your partner. Well, your dopamine neurons are firing at a low rate until you start thinking about the thing that you want or the thing that you're looking forward to. When you eat that food, the amount of dopamine that's released in this reward pathway goes up about 50% above baseline. Sex increases dopamine levels about 100%, so basically doubles them. Nicotine, about 150%. Cocaine and amphetamine, 1,000-fold. However, just thinking about food, sex, nicotine, or cocaine or amphetamine can increase the amount of dopamine that's released to the same degree as actually consuming the drug. Now, it depends, but it's just enough to put them on the motivation track to crave that particular thing. Now, nowadays, there's a ton of interest in social media and in video games. Those can release dopamine somewhere between nicotine and cocaine. So very high levels of dopamine release. And yet people still get addicted. So why? Being addicted to something isn't just about the fact that it feels so good that you want to do it over and over again. And that's because of this pleasure-pain balance that underlies motivation. So let's look a little bit closer at the pleasure-pain balance, because therein lies the tools for you to be able to control motivation toward healthy things and avoid motivated behaviors towards things that are destructive for you. When you anticipate something, a little bit of dopamine is released. And then when you reach that thing, you engage in that thing, the amount of dopamine goes up even further. But as you repeatedly pursue a behavior and you repeatedly engage with a particular thing, let's say you love chocolate. As you eat a piece of chocolate, it tastes good. And then there's a shift away from activation of dopamine. And there are other chemicals that are released that trigger a low-level sense of pain. Now, you might not feel it as physical pain, but the craving that you feel is both one part dopamine and one part the mirror image of dopamine. And this is a very important and subtle feature of the dopamine system that's not often discussed. People always talk about just as pleasure. For every bit of pleasure, there is a mirror image experience of pain. And they overlap in time very closely, so it's sometimes hard to sense this. But try it. The next time you eat something really delicious, you'll take a bite, it tastes delicious, and part of the experience is to want more of that thing. Now, what happens is that initially you experience an increase in pleasure, and you also experience this increase in pain shortly after, or woven in with the pleasure, that makes you want more of that thing. But with each subsequent time that you encounter that thing, the experience of dopamine release and pleasure is diminished a little bit. And the diabolical thing is that the pain response is increased a little bit. And this is best observed in the context of drug-seeking behavior. The first time someone decides to take cocaine or amphetamine, they will experience a huge dopamine release, and they will feel likely very good. However, the next time they take it, it won't feel quite as good, and it won't feel even as good the next time. But the amount of pain, the amount of craving that they experience for the drug will increase over time. So much of our pursuit of pleasure is simply to reduce the pain of craving. So your desire for something is proportional to how pleasurable it is to indulge in that thing, but also how much pain you experience when you don't have it. And you can now start to let your mind wander into all sorts of examples of addictions or things that you happen to like. I'll use the example that I sometimes use on here, which is my love of croissants. The taste of that croissant makes me want to eat more croissants. Now, eventually blood sugar goes up, satiety is reached, etc. What happens then? What is satisfaction and satiety about? Well, that's a separate neuromodulator. That's about the neuromodulator serotonin, oxytocin, prolactin. Those were described as the here and now molecules, the ones that allow you to experience your sensations and pleasure in the present and for which the brain stops projecting into the future. So now let's talk about craving and these so-called here and now molecules and how those engage in a kind of push-pull balance that will allow you to enjoy the things in life that you are pursuing to a much greater degree. We have neurons in an area of our brain called the raphe. The raphe releases serotonin at different places in the brain. Serotonin is the molecule of bliss and contentment for what you already have. I've talked before about exteroception, a focus on the outside world, everything beyond the confines of your skin. I've also talked about interoception, a focus on things that are happening internally within the confines of your skin. Dopamine and serotonin can be thought of as related to exteroception. Dopamine makes us focused on things outside us that are beyond what we call our personal space, where we actually have to move and take action in order to achieve things. And serotonin in general has to do with the things that are in our immediate here and now, hence the description of these as the here and now molecules. Just understand that dopamine biases us toward thinking about what we don't have, whereas serotonin and some of the related molecules make you feel kind of blissed out and content in the present. So you got these two systems. They're kind of like a push-pull meditation practice that's different than most meditation practices, where you eat one almond and you focus all of your attention on the almond, the taste of the almond, the texture of the almond. That's really a mindfulness practice that's geared towards trying to take a behavior which is normally about pursuit and bring it into the here and now. That's a mental trick that the mindfulness community has really embraced in order to try and create increased pleasure for what you already have. It's really trying to accomplish a shift from dopamine being released to serotonin being involved in that behavior. So the most important thing in creating a healthy emotional landscape is to have a balance between these two neuromodulator systems. And so one of the things that you can do in order to generally just be a happier person, especially if you're a person in pursuit of long-term goals of any kind, is the longer that you can extend that positive phase of the dopamine release, and the more that you can blunt the pain response to that, the better. And you can actually do this cognitively. What I've still tried to do is try and extend the arc of that positive experience as long as I possibly can, simply by thinking back like, oh, that was really cool. I really enjoyed doing that work. I really enjoyed doing that with the people that I was working with at the time. What a pleasure that was. So you can extend pleasure without having to engage in the behavior over and over. That's extending the arc of that dopamine release. As well, it offsets some of the pain of not having that experience occur over and over again. And indeed, adopting a practice of being able to engage in the here and now, of learning how to achieve a really good night's sleep on a regular basis, gives us sort of balance to the pleasure seeking and offsetting of pain and the pleasure in the here and now. So pleasure is really two things. It's a joy in pursuit, but it's also the joy in what you have. The cool thing is you can actually regulate this whole system in a way that will steer you or lean you towards more positive anticipation of things in life and less disappointment. It's simply a matter of adjusting what we call the dopamine schedule. In order to understand how to control the dopamine system, how to leverage it for a better life, you need to understand the results of a very important experiment. This experiment was able to separate pleasure from motivation. What they did, they offered rats food. It was a food that they particularly liked. And the animals would lever press for a pellet of food. They'd eat the food. And they presumably liked the food because they were motivated to press the lever and eat it. Great. They took other rats. They eliminated the dopamine neurons. So they actually had no dopamine in their brain. They have no ability to release dopamine. And they gave them a lever. The rats would sit there and they'd hit the lever and they'd eat the food. They could still enjoy the food, but if they moved the rat literally one body length away from the lever, what they found was the animals that had dopamine would move over to the lever, press it, and eat. And the ones that did not have dopamine available to them wouldn't even move one body length to the lever in order to press it and get the food. Dopamine, therefore, is not about the ability to experience pleasure. It is about motivation for pleasure. So now let's talk about what is a dopamine schedule and how you can leverage this in order to have heightened levels of motivation, but not get so much dopamine that you're experiencing a crash afterwards, and also so that you can experience heightened pleasure from the various pursuits that you are engaged in life. The reason why people go back again and again to places like Las Vegas is because of the hope and anticipation. They are leveraging your dopamine system. Gambling addiction is particularly sinister because the next time really could be the thing that changes everything. Unlike other addictions, the next time really could change everything, and that's embedded in the mind of the gambling addict. So this is the slot machine that every once in a while gives you a win to keep you playing. Intermittent reinforcement is the most powerful form of dopamine reward schedule to keep you doing something. So we can export that. If there's something that you're pursuing in life, whether or not it's an academic goal or a financial goal, one of the things that you can do to ensure that you will remain on the path to that goal for a very long time and that you will continue to exceed your previous performance, as well as continue to enjoy the dopamine release that occurs when you hit the milestones that you want to achieve, is to occasionally remove reward subjectively. Let's say you want to get a certain number of followers on whatever social media platform. As you reach each one of those goals, you should know now that the amount of dopamine is not going to peak. It's actually going to diminish and make you crave more. The key to avoiding that crash, but to still keep it in healthy levels that will allow you to continue your pursuit, is as you are staircasing toward your goal, you actually want to blunt the reward response for some of those intermediate goals. Now, I'm not telling you shouldn't celebrate your wins, but I'm telling you not to celebrate all of them. If you're a student who's pursuing goals in university, it actually makes sense from a rational perspective, once you understand these mechanisms, to hit a new high point of performance or to get that A+ and to tell yourself, okay, that was good, but to actually actively blunt the reward, to not go and celebrate too intensely. Because in doing that, you keep your dopamine system in check and you ensure that you're going to stay on the path of continued pursuit, not just for that thing, but for all things. So you can lift what Las Vegas have known for a long time. You can now take it back and start to leverage that, and you just make it intermittent. You reward yourself not on a predictable schedule. So not every other time or every third time, but sometimes it's 3 in a row, then not at all for 10 days. So self-reward is critically important, but make sure that you're not doing it on such a predictable schedule that you burn out these dopamine circuits or that you undercut your own ability to strive and achieve.